Hey guys, and welcome to, I guess, Nostalgia Junkie question mark, which is betwixt the books, but it's when we read a children's series. We've called it Nostalgia Junkie since the beginning. This one's maybe not quite exactly Nostalgia Junkie because neither of us had read the series as kids, whereas I think with all of the previous Nostalgia Junkie series that we've done, we had at least one of us had read it at some point as kids. So this is the first time that we're reading a series as an adult that we didn't read as kids, but we're here to talk about the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, the first 5 books. If you recall, last year, one of our reading challenges was to read an entire series, and Gretchen completed it all over the summer. I snuck right in. I think the last book I did technically finish in 2024, but we counted it as a completed challenge because Gretchen completed it. We just didn't have a video content for you yet. It's been completed. We've done it. It's both of us have read all of the books. Did it, nailed it. And so now we can talk about it. We are going to say, especially because Gretchen did read it so long ago, that this is going to be a little bit different than all of our previous Nostalgia Junkie series, where we went like book by book and talked about like everything in that particular book and gave a review. This is really going to be more of a holistic series review because remembering exactly which events happened in which books and like that sort of thing is maybe a little bit blurry for us. But
Well, and I think based on like how we've been talking about them the whole time, I don't
yeah,
know that even if we did do it right after we both finished, if we would have done it that way.
yeah.
For reasons that we will discuss because I don't know if we even could have done it then.
Yes, yeah. There's we'll talk about it. But yeah, Gretchen, do you want to do a what the series is based on overview in case people don't know what Percy Jackson is about?
Yes. If you have, I mean, to be fair, the reason that we read it is because we didn't read it as kids, but
Yeah.
I feel like Percy Jackson has been in the zeitgeist
Yeah.
for a really long time now. But it is a story of you're never gonna guess this, but a guy named Percy Jackson,
What?
a young kid, yeah. Despite if you only knew the really bad movies, not the age of Logan Lerman in those, um, young child boy,
Yes.
and he's just kind of out with his school, like on a trip. He's moved around a lot. He has a mom who loves him and a really awful stepdad who smells terribly. This is a thing. This is part of the plot. It's not just me being, judgmental. Um, and he's just kind of out, and all of a sudden, he just starts getting attacked by things that may or may not be mythical creatures. And he's like, I'm like very, very off my ADHD meds. Not sure what's going on. Come to find out that he is the son of a Greek god. And so he is a half blood. And so he goes for the summer in the first book for the first time. And of course, all of these books take place over the summer ish at Camp Half Blood ish. Obviously, there are quests in every single one, where he meets centaurs and other mythical creatures who teach there, as well as other half blood children, and finds out, spoiler alert, that he's the son of Poseidon. I feel like the first book hit that from you, but if again you know anything about it, it's like not a secret anymore.
No.
He's just like the son of Poseidon. It's a basic thing. And yeah, every single book is an individual questy thing. But in the first one, he does have to find Zeus's lightning bolt, of which he is accused of having stolen, but he's been framed, and he has to go like unframe himself before the gods smite him.
Yep. As you know, you would if you got accused of stealing just a sacred item from a god.
I don't think the god of lightning is someone who's going to be gentle in his punishment. So
No, and definitely not if you know anything about Zeus as a person in mythology either. That particular person, maybe don't piss him off. So, yes. Overall, I'll start with my opinion for this series because I'm not gonna go book by book and do this. Overall, it was like a solid meh, like 3 stars. Like they're not horrible by any means. They're not poorly written by any means, but there was not a whole lot in there that really grabbed me and engaged me. And I do again realize as an adult, I'm not the target audience. Like I really spent a lot of time thinking about like if I was like 10-year-old me, would I have felt differently about this versus like nearly 30-year-old me reading these books? And not for me. I was a sci-fi kid, not a fantasy kid. I was not a mythology kid. Like this, there's not a whole lot in this series that would have grabbed me as a reader, even at 10 years old. Um, Not so much that I would have been engaged in it in the way that a lot of people were. Like a lot of my peers, we've seen people through our entire lives that were doing fan art or were big fans of Percy Jackson. It's not just not for me in particular as a reader, whether I was a kid or not. And I will talk a bit probably about like me now and my reading experience with it, but also just I wanted to throw it out there that like personally, probably wouldn't I didn't pick it up as a kid, and then also probably if I had, I wouldn't have read past the first book, because it didn't have a whole lot going for it that was working on the levels of like what I enjoyed as a kid. Um, that was one of the reasons probably why we wouldn't have been able to do a book by book review, is that most of the time we were like, yeah, it was fine. Like everything was there, it was executed, but we didn't have a whole lot to talk about book by book because there wasn't like a lot of things that we could like pick apart to the point where we could be like this needed to change and this needed to change and this needed to change. It was just passable. And when you get to the point where your books are just passable, it's really hard to do a review. There's not a lot of good stuff to talk about and there's not a lot of bad stuff to talk about. So solid 3 stars. Like definitely I know exactly who to sell this to as a bookseller. Like the type of kid that I could hand this to and I know that they'll eat it up and love it. I know that, which is great. So like if you're a mythology kid, take it. You'll love this. It'll be super fun for you. Outside of that, I'm not sure that it has the same staying power as some of the other series that we've read and enjoyed in the past personally.
Yeah, as a kid, I think I would have been different. Because I was a mythology kid. I think the reason that this kind of slipped by me at the time was just like my exact age when it first came out. Because I graduated to reading very thick books very quickly. And so I probably would have seen these and been like, oh, like that's too thin for me.
Yeah.
But I was an Egypt mythology kid. So I could very well see like and I have read the Kane Chronicles, which is another one of these series, which we'll talk about a little bit. Prior to reading this, the reason being I was leading a book club over the summer, and there are 3 months to the summer, and that is the only trilogy that he's written. Yeah. The rest of them are all like 5 books, so that was how the Kane Chronicles got picked. But and those are his Egypt ones, if you don't know.
Yes, yeah.
But I definitely could have seen, like, especially when I would have realized that the series was going into other mythologies as well, been like, oh, like this is a world that I want to dip into. I think in terms of a reading experience, it was so I've seen the bad movies that Rick Riordan wants to burn.
Yeah.
He had a tweet the other day with someone asking him about the movies versus a TV show. And he literally, I think, just said like normalize bad movie erasure. So I'm sorry to discuss these, but I had seen those and enjoyed them. And so I read the first book and I was like, yep, with some changes. Like, I've seen this movie. And then I read the second book and I was like, yep, that's kind of the movie, but better. But it's the same general plot. And I was like, oh, these are like, okay. And then I feel like it kind of sped up a little bit like towards the end where I was more engaged. And I think that was definitely the reason. I think I'm more used to in a series there being some like direct reason that you immediately want to go pick up the next one. And I just kind of felt like this one, they were very isolated, except for maybe the fourth and the fifth book. So that felt definitely a little bit weird to me. And again, I can imagine that being nice if you had to wait
yes, yeah.
in between publication, but it did feel like you better hope that people are really grabbed by the idea of the series. Because yeah, that felt a little odd. I think my word is not passable. My word is solid.
Yeah.
Like it's a really solidly written series, but for the same thing Michaela just said, it's when you just like something, it's really hard to review because, you know, I don't want to say anything extremely negative about it, but at the same time, because I just enjoyed it and I enjoyed the whole thing and I read it and it's fine. I don't have any like specific like thing I want to weave through all 5 books or whatever. But I definitely see how good they are. But at the same time, having read a later series, I can also see how this was improved upon. Let me put it that way in later series.
So, yeah, I wanted to talk about that like episodic nature that these books have. And you have probably heard me in particular when we have talked about series in the past, talk about how I dislike it when books can't be read on their own. Like they don't have a solid arc within the book itself. And it's just like this is clearly the middle of a story or like the beginning of a story. And you don't get a full, complete story when it comes to a series. Like I don't like that. It was weird to have the opposite experience, to read a book that was so isolated within itself that I was like, yeah, I can stop here. Like I don't feel like I need to keep going. Like it's weird with a series to have that sensation. It's very much monster of the week. Like what's the problem today? Let's go tackle it and then we'll do it again next summer, I guess. Like with the exception of like halfway through the series when a grand prophecy is sort of revealed, that gives you a little bit more of a driving factor to look at the next book in the series to see how it is resolved. That there it is very much like, and we're going on an adventure this summer and then we're going back to school and it's normal for a couple of months, and then we're going on an adventure this summer and then we're going back to school and it's normal for a couple of months. And again, I don't, none of this is bad. Like I enjoy the fact that they are self-contained. There's a full arc within each of these books. Those arcs are satisfying. Like you go through the whole thing with them and you enjoy it. But when it's just okay and there's nothing that's really pushing you to pick up the next one, is it successful as a whole series? Question mark. Again, there will be kids who like, again, love the concept of it and will chew through all of these really quickly. There will be kids that like get really attached to these characters. I think that's the other thing that people might like become attached to and want to keep living in the world, is that they want to see what happens to Percy and Annabeth. They want to see how their stories progress, even if it isn't like a big bad that they're trying to fight. It's more so just I like these characters and want to hang out with them. They're like my friends. I do think that those characters were really strong and were something that like Riordan does quite well, is to create like these interesting characters. Even the side characters were all like interesting and had quirks and stuff that I enjoy. You know that I'm a side character person. And I know that he is now also writing stories for some of those side characters. Like I believe last year there was a side character story for Nico, who was like one of my favorites towards the later part of this series, that I enjoyed when he popped up in the books. So yeah, there's that. But it is definitely structured episodically. Like you get a full story in each of these books. And that could be to its detriment or to, you know, the positives as well. So yeah, again, kind of in the middle. Like, yes, it was good. We liked it. It was fine.
So bouncing off of what Michaela just said, I think that the format of the books, if you will, ends up being very weird, especially in the later books. So again, this is not a new format, right? Where things are done like on a school year. For example, you can think of the Harry Potter books, they work like that. The Charlie Bone books work like that as well. So this is not new, right? It's not like Riordan made this up. But what he's doing, right, is it's every summer and not every school year. And as any school child in America will tell you, the summer is very short. The school year is very long. And one of the things that's funny is that the first book opens with Percy being attacked like during the school year.
Yeah.
Right. And so you know that these things can happen outside of the summer.
Yeah.
And that there are people who are after him for reasons. You know, even once he's like returned the lightning bolt, right? There are reasons for him to be in the gaze of the bad guy. And so first of all, it feels a little odd. You're like, okay, like you've saved the world and now you're going back for like 10 months of school to get us back to like 2 months of summer. was a little weird. And then especially once the prophecy comes out and it's like, you will die on your X birthday. And he's like, cool. So I'm going to work on this for 2 months and then I'm going to go back and have like a normal school year and come back for the summer. And you're like, what? Like the fact that there's like no urgency to that within the format of the book feels so weird. Because to me, I'm like, I'm sorry, if you told me that I have an expiration date, like I'm gonna be working on that. Like, I don't need algebra, I need to not die. And so the episodic, like every summer thing starts to feel especially wonky and almost like completely unrealistic. At least to me, because I was like,
Yeah.
don't die.
Yeah. Sort of off of those lines, the thing that I sort of talked about when Gretchen and I were talking about this was how like 100% if we weren't doing a video review of the whole series, that I personally would not have finished the series. I do this a lot with kids' books where I read the first book so that I'm able to at least talk about it and engage with a kid if they're like, I need a book that's like this series. I can be like, okay, I know the elements that are sort of involved in that series, or like I can talk about the voice and I can talk about the characters and I know like which other series have similar elements that I can recommend. It's just helpful for my job to do that. And some of those series I started and went, I'm gonna grab the second book. And this was not one of those series where like I finished the first book and I felt like, okay, I'm gonna grab the second book. If I had picked up the second book is probably the weakest out of all of the books in the series. So that definitely would have stopped me. I would have read the second book and been like, okay, I'm good. I'm done with this. I don't need to do it. And Gretchen agreed that like the fourth and fifth book were probably the strongest ones, the ones that had the most momentum that made you want to finish out the series, which is good. Like you want to get to the end and like get the resolution of everything. But if you can't get to the point where you start having that momentum, it's kind of a failure. Both of us have also had people who were like big fans of the series in our lives tell us that the second series, the is it the Heroes of
Olympus or
Olympus
something.
series? I don't know. The second series, which are much thicker books, first off, but two, they're older. I think they're teenagers in that
Mm-hmm.
series versus the like kid versions here where they're like what 10, 12-ish. Um, those are better. And Gretchen can also talk about how like his writing has gotten better because I believe like obviously this is his first series, so like there's definitely a little bit of like trying to figure out your writing style, trying to figure out your world when you're doing this. It's the first one. But I am still a firm believer in if I have to read 5 books before I get to the good books, it's not really worth my time and investment. Now, kids will read and probably be less upset about the time investment because like as an adult I only have so much free time. Like most of my time is taken up by work, and while kids have school, they have way more free time outside of that they can invest in something like this. So it's not necessarily bad for kids. Like if a kid's picking up this book, I can totally like see them like liking this and then getting to the really good stuff. But as an adult, like if I'm gonna invest time into something, I probably wouldn't have invested as much time in this if we weren't doing a video about it.
Yeah, and I'm sure this is one of those situations where, like, also, if you read them for the intended age group when they came
Yes.
out, and then, like, the books get better and they also get older. So it's the same thing as, like, the Harry Potter books where you are actually, like, growing up along with the characters. And that, too, makes you just feel even more personally connected with them.
Yep.
But yeah, I was talking to a friend who's a big Percy Jackson fan, big mythology person. And even they were saying, the later Percy Jackson series, when they're a little bit older, they get into some more like deeper themes and issues. Um, Again, I have not read those. I have read the Kane Chronicles, and in those, the two main characters are like a brother sister team who are also like tweens or younger. I can't exactly remember. So it's not like they are both teenagers in that series. There is only 3 books instead of the 5, which is a little bit different. Um, but I definitely felt throughout, and those are my first Rick Riordan books that I'd ever read. And I definitely thought they had higher stakes. They were more emotional. They were more continuously exciting, and they were funnier. I remember full on just during those books, like just like laughing out loud and just like really, really enjoying them and how silly they were, but like not in a dumb way, which I feel like sometimes, and I'm not saying Rick Riordan has ever done this at all, but I feel like sometimes when people write humor for kids, it's like dumb humor or potty humor or something. They were just like funny and silly and punny, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And so I have to admit that that was what I thought we would be getting with these books, even though, I mean, probably not a fair assumption anyway, because any good writer gets better.
Yeah.
Right. And the Kane Chronicles did come along much later. So I do think that it's also probably like, again, if you read these when, you know, at the age, Rick Riordan has gotten better as an author, the characters have gotten older, and you just become more invested in the universe as well, as opposed to us who are just like finally dipping our toes in. But yeah, don't let anything that we're saying be like, oh, these aren't as good as anyone thinks they are. Because they are good, they are good enough, and potentially, if you're really into it, worth the investment to continue on as the stories get older, um, like more nuanced and just better written in general.
Yeah. I just really quickly wanted to say that because it took me so long to freaking read these, that the TV show came out, and I was able to watch a little bit of it. I watched the first 2 episodes of it, and sort of the same feeling I had with the book, where I was like, "Yep, this is good. It's solid. I don't really have any complaints. I've been enjoying it so far." But also I'm kind of like, I could take it or leave it, and I don't need to keep watching it. Really, what I would want to keep watching is for some of the actors that I know that are in it that are playing particular characters. But like, I'm not super invested in the plot. One of the things that I said to Gretchen was like, I don't think this is going to sell subscriptions to Disney Plus in the same way that like Stranger Things sells subscriptions for Netflix. Like, people will buy a Netflix subscription just to watch that show. This being only on Disney Plus, I feel like it's definitely a solid option if you're a person who has a Disney Plus account. I get mine with my phone plan. I know a lot of parents have it, and obviously this is aimed at like tweens. Like, it's not like, it's clearly a show for kids. I don't think this is like trying to be highbrow and shooting off at adults who loved the series. I think they would also enjoy it, and that there's like little Easter eggs. And I know that Rick Riordan likes it a lot better than the movies, which I had not seen. But it's definitely one of those things where like it's a solid show again. Yeah, what?
I'm sorry, you missed the image of
I
Pierce
did.
Brosnan as a centaur.
I did, in fact,
That was a
miss.
very special moment.
I did not watch those movies. I'm so sorry to disappoint. I
Yeah,
don't
I
have
mean,
the same hate for them that everybody else does. I'm like, this was bad.
like I said, I actually like, you know, I enjoyed the movies for what they were. I mean, the first one more, the second one's like, oh. But again, it's also based off the weakest book, so like just
Yeah.
um but you know, I canceled my Disney Plus because I wasn't using it enough and there are too many streaming services. And so I was basically waiting for Michaela to get back to me and being like, should I get my Disney Plus back so we can and I mean, I might someday, just because I think I definitely just overall these books and are like more for the nerd in me than the nerd in Michaela.
Yeah.
um but it's not something that, you know, again, I'm not the target audience, and there's too many streaming services.
Yeah. I guess just to wrap it up, I had wanted to talk about how we sort of would rank this series with the other series that we have done in Nostalgia Junkie. So for those of you who don't know, we did the entire series of Unfortunate Events, like one over a week. Like, we read one book a day for like a week.
That was
So
such an experience.
we did that. We have also done my favorite series growing up, which was the Pendragon series with our friend Casey. Like, we read those once a week, I think. Like, it was still quite quick that we read that, but like not quite as quick as Series of Unfortunate Events.
No, we learned our lesson.
We did. We were like, can't do that again.
Can't do that.
This was real rough. I think the other one that we did was what Philip Pullman's Dark
Golden
Materials.
Compass.
So those are the ones that we have read and reviewed as like adults. And again, we all had some sort of experience with those as kids beforehand. So we just kind of wanted to talk about this series in relation to those. I feel like in the current zeitgeist of if you went into a kids department today versus like back in the past when these books were coming out, Series of Unfortunate Events is definitely still on the shelves. People can buy it, but it's like one copy of each book. And Lemony Snicket or Daniel Handler writing as Lemony Snicket hasn't really put out anything else other than that. Riordan has like half of a bay, multiple shelves because he's continued to produce books for kids. Lots of different series or continuations, side series, side books have still been ongoing and coming out. Pendragon is not even on the shelves unless a bookseller brings it in, namely me, because it just was not read quite as widely even back then as it is now. And then obviously there's something like Harry Potter, which we have not reread and probably will never reread because we're not big fans of J.K. Rowling. But that obviously is exploded and is like all over the store. There's gift stuff. There's like all sorts of things. So like in the zeitgeist of the world, Percy Jackson feels like it's like underneath Rowling as far as popularity, but not necessarily waning in the same way that some of these other series have like waned out of popularity. Personally, I liked either of those other series better than this one just for enjoyment value, but again, that might just be a personal thing. I like understand why some people would like really latch on to this as like a part of their personality. If you're a mythology kid. So like I do totally understand that. But it is not going to be like, if I was ranking these, it's definitely not number 2 for me. How about for you? How do you feel about these?
I might make you get in your car and drive and fight me. um, so I still do think that Pendragon is number 1 for me.
Which is the most unfortunate because it's the one that's forgotten.
The one that's forgotten. Even when we did the entire 10-book series, even DJ McHale was like, the author was like, "You're doing all 10 books?" And we were like, "Hi."
Yes, yes, hi.
I would rank it number 2.
Okay.
And the reason being that I don't think the Series of Unfortunate Events is just not my, particularly as a child, was not my speed. And I read them and I enjoyed them because we were all reading them. I didn't enjoy reading one book a day for 13 days. That was something else. But they're just not my speed, I don't think. I mean, as like a person who appreciates good writing, like 100%, I would say that that entire series is probably in a literary value above this particular Rick Riordan series. But like as a whole vibe, it's just not mine. And then somewhere down in the deep crevice is the Golden Compass.
Yeah, I was going to say Golden Compass is definitely still below this. Like, I don't want you to think that this is like the bottom of my list by any means. Golden Compass was not good. We did not enjoy it.
No,
like
I think what's really funny is that like we even finished The Magicians.
Yes.
We did one book of The Magicians a year, despite like absolutely despising that series. And we got through 2 of the Golden Compass books. We did Golden Compass and Subtle Knife. And then we were like, it's not even.
I don't want to finish.
Nobody got time for that.
Yeah.
And again, like literary value, like I understand people who like, you know, have a thing with that. I understand it. But as something that I want to spend my time reading, both as a child and as an adult, the answer is no.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like for me, I would probably go Pendragon, Series of Unfortunate Events, then this one, then Golden Compass down here. Because it just I did appreciate Series of Unfortunate Events as a kid. It was probably one of my favorite series as a kid, and definitely like if you've watched those videos, Taylor would probably also put Series of Unfortunate Events quite high because both of us that was like a very fundamental series in our like reading journeys. But yeah.
As a child, I read the first book
and
I went, nope.
Yeah.
And promptly moved on. I didn't read the rest of them until we did that
series.
Yeah.
So That's Nostalgia Junkie. That's us talking about a kid series. In this case, one that we missed, and maybe for me, rightly so. Like, good. I didn't read it. I probably wouldn't have liked it as a kid. Totally makes sense why I didn't pick it up. Gretchen maybe
No.
missed something that she maybe would have really liked as a kid. Who knows? Yeah, it was solid. Again, I feel like I'm being very mean to the series, and I don't want to say that it was bad by any capacity. Like if you were gonna ask me like a series I wouldn't recommend to kids anymore, Golden Compass. Like I don't even talk about that with kids unless they're like asking for it specifically, and then I will get it for them. But like I know who I could recommend these books to. Like there's definitely people who this book series is for. And clearly it's popular enough to have clearly it's popular enough to have maintained popularity over time and to like overcome flops of movies. Like that means a lot for a book series.
Yeah. Do you know how rare that is
To get a
for, and
second
not just
chance, yeah.
like indie studio to pick it back up. Like Disney
Yeah.
said yes. That's huge.
Yeah.
And I don't think we mentioned it, but we have reviewed some of the Rick Riordan Presents books,
Yes.
which is his now publishing imprint, where he said, like, I, as a white man, should not be telling some of these stories, but there are other mythologies from around the world that really could be their own inspiration. Some of them are series like Percy Jackson that take place in our world, where these mythological beings come to life. And some of them are like sci-fi books, you know. So there is also not only a more diverse like pantheon, but also just like more diverse settings and plots and genres there as well. And I don't think from neither of us have read a bad one.
No.
Like
Yeah.
they've all been really good.
Yeah. So definitely like an author that we want to support because he's taking his success and helping to boost diverse authors and diverse voices and diverse stories, which is something that we're both like very much behind. Like we want Rick Riordan to continue to succeed and do well. And yeah, I don't I don't know that I personally would continue with a lot of his books. I do own the Nico book, which I might read just because I think like I really enjoyed that character and I know that there is queer rep there as well, which is awesome and I'm glad to see that in the kids department and not just like segregated to YA. like you cannot be gay until you get over here.
Right.
So it's nice to see that there. So yeah, it's definitely something that like I might look at that and be like, hey, now I have read something that is much more modern with like his like continued 20 books later. Like, let's see how I feel about it. I might be interested in doing something like that. So yeah, that's how we felt about Percy Jackson.
So very proud of both of us for finally not only finishing this series, but also finally finishing for our buddy reading challenge, read an entire series. Our own fault
Yes.
that we went and chose a 5 book series rather than a duology or even a trilogy. We recognize this,
Yeah.
but we really wanted to read this particular series and we finally accomplished it. Other things that you can look forward to in the month of February, Michaela and I should have a another horror novella arc review coming, which is a second book to a horror novella that I liked.
Yeah.
Which will never not be weird to me, but you can look forward to seeing if that magic continues. And then I think our like the 1st of March is technically our next video after that. And around ish that time, we should have our first reading roundtable of the year, in which the 2 of us and 1 to 2 of our friends will be here to talk about just what we're reading and have a chat and share some recommendations. Or sometimes, I guess, books to avoid. They've gone both ways. But that is what we have planned for our next couple of Betwixt videos. And otherwise, you will see Michaela and myself doing individual videos because Michaela's back, baby. It's not just my face. So we will see you guys for all of that good stuff. Bye.